My dear friends, the miracle that we have just heard about is one that Christians have been witnessing over the centuries. It happens in a minor key in our own existence if we're attentive. We have nothing, and out of the blue the exact sum comes through divine providence, using a nudge for someone else at the right time. We bump into somebody out of the blue, and it's not just a coincidence, but a genuine God incidence. Yesterday, I was in Belfast keeping a promise. Some months ago, there had been a lassie on a retreat of discernment with me for a week or 10 days, at the end of which she had shared what had happened out of the blue. Her mother had found a clip of a Catholic paper about a convent in Belfast where Jesus was Lord. Adoration, just adoration. And so, at the end of the week, we discussed it, and we said, in plain English, go for it. So, 6 months down the line, I saw her, and she will be given the habit on the 6th of August, and she was, as someone else had noted, radiant. That was just because her mother had happened to cut out a clip of a newspaper. Translate. Are there occasions that you can trace that have led you to significant encounters? It can be happening at the most unexpected of moments. It can be happening actually to those who don't particularly want it to happen. But first of all, I'd like to dwell with this particular miracle which keeps reproducing itself. I mentioned before cases like what Francis Hogan saw in Africa. The pot was empty only at the end of the long day when all the hundreds had eaten from it, and it was always the same quantity, no matter who was coming into it and dipping. This happened in the life of St. Paul of the Cross, the founder of the Passionists. In a year of great scarcity of corn, a charitable lady who every year supported many poor told St. Paul that she must omit her charity this year because her granary was almost empty. This saint told her, "Give the usual alms." Now, by the way, amongst the saints there is an unwritten rule. It's this: if you're in need, give. I leave it with you because actually it works. Providence is always more generous than we are. We gamble sometimes with that might that rules the world, but it never lets us down as long as it's for the right motive. So, give the usual alms. Rather like Elijah, isn't it? And even more than usual, and God will multiply your store. She obeyed to the letter. With only 30 quarts of grain at the time of his visit, they used it themselves and gave larger alms, and at the end of several months found exactly the quantity of grain they had in the beginning. Now, this has been taken all along the centuries as a prefiguration of what we are doing right now. How, by a capillary effect, that command that came once in the upper room extends all over the globe. Do this in memory of me. And that power of the Blessed Trinity comes into this assembly with the same multiplication. Remember now, every moment of consecration at every altar throughout the world is not less but greater than this prefiguration of it. We cannot see it usually, although there are miracles, but we know that there is a fundamental, an ontological, a substantial change. And that is what makes it possible for our God to be received. Because if it didn't happen, that is, if he didn't camouflage himself, we could not receive him in that form. But there is also the multiplication of what he wanted equally to be multiplied until the end of time. He was the one who would heal us, but he was also our teacher and master. And he has empowered his people, and only his people, that is the church founded by himself, to speak in his name. Just yesterday, in that area of Belfast, I was shown a picture on the wall of actually the present superior when she was a young nun, just in front of a firebomb, just in front of the monastery in the Falls Road. It was all happening around them. Now, afterwards, I went to visit people nearby who had given me the beautiful statue of Our Lady, which I have in my chapel, which came from a convent in Belfast, which is closed down, Poor Clare's. And it's a very beautiful statue. It's almost smiling with beady eyes. And it had to have a good home, and it came this way out of the blue. But the thing was, I was listening to what they were saying. They were, these people in Randallstown, and they just off the cuff came out with this. Ballymena, which is fairly close down there, is very Protestant. And they had to, in the end, demolish the brand new church, which they said was a beautiful chapel. When the good Catholics had the nerve to go through the Protestant area to Mass, they were insulted big time by those watching them. And also the church was in that way aggressed and insulted. The stained glass windows didn't last very long. It was all happening on the walls. There was only one way, and it was actually to pull out and actually to demolish the new church. It's not that long ago that that happened. And I thought to myself, this, although we have no right to judge, indicates what is actually happening when we don't listen to the authentic voice of God on earth. I bet you that if you scratch underneath the kind of people who are doing that you will find something not dissimilar going on amongst themselves, because something based on the human has human results. I am sure that one split will lead to another, one quarrel will be very unpleasant, and so on. Whereas, do you know that recently, in Belfast itself, they'd had the courage, the forgiveness, and the charity to invite a local Protestant pastor to speak at the Great Clonard Novena. Now that's forgiveness big time. Now, what I wanted to say is this. These people, they are functioning obviously within some kind of framework which they have to be faithful to, because even an erroneous conscience obliges. But it shows, actually, how things can go out of order when precisely the Lord's project is not followed through. And sometimes the Lord comes into it. And this miracle, which we now cannot see on the altar, he makes visible. And he actually does it in front of them. This happened not that long ago. I've shown it before, but because you're somewhat different this time, I'll show it again. It happened in, I believe, the States. It matters little, it may not have been actually, it may have been another country where there was a large Protestant presence. And basically, it was during the Corpus Christi procession. And this fairly hot-headed evangelical was keen on showing how thick we were, how idiots we can be to actually adore a bit of bread. And so he photographed this bit of bread in the procession. And what was his shock when this came out? Now that's something you can't fake. The camera sees and clips what it's caught. Now, this is not just one isolated case. It's happening quite a lot if you look and listen, e.g. on the internet. He's around, our God, and his arm is not shortened. These miracles of the early church are still around, and in a way, bigger and better, because they're multiplied straight away by the media, which brings me to where I want to land. The Lord commissioned us to spread his word in the church. And it hit me only actually this morning, as I happened to look at something which I'd forgotten I'd written. It was the eve of my departure the second time for Rome, just ordained, and they were sending me back to do more study. And out of the blue, this came to my cell. Here, you'll need this. It was a laptop, which I'd never handled ever before, and it was a great blessing. And then I looked at it, and it looked at me, and I have a clue how to work it, but I wrote on it just what it was. This thing I knew was bigger than I was. It had a huge brain. It could actually reach many, 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 many souls. Because precisely we have in our hands means of doing what the Lord was doing here with the bread, with the word. And indeed, that is what we must do. Benedict XVI was saying in his own elegant terms, get in there. Don't let the others have the monopoly of this agora. It's important that we use what we've got to hit hard and with means that actually function. And we've got them. We've got brilliant people out there working for the Lord. And do you know that the Lord actually is not shy to go across the barriers of Christianity itself, even to our brethren, the Jews and the Muslims. Do you know that some years ago, one of the greatest and most respected rabbis of all times, who was looked up to by all the Orthodox Jews, just before he died, went into some kind of ecstasy. And he was given knowledge, which, because he knew of the significance of it, he had to put in code form. But they got the message and they knew what it meant. He had seen Yeshua. They knew what that meant and what that experience meant to one of the greatest rabbis before he met his God. And I think it was more explicit still. It was Yeshua Messiah. It was that the Lord was the Christ. This morning I found something equally stunning. Do you know that the most difficult people to convert on this planet are the Muslims? I found a whole series of people of high standing in that faith who've had just the same experience. Just leave one with you, it might be of interest to you because it's a double one. He and his dying brother, actually his dead brother, he was in the morgue. His name is Nasa Sadiki, direct descendant of one of the major caliphs of the Muslim world. With good English, he was all against Christianity, but he was dying. And he saw the beyond, because he did actually die. He saw, yes, the Jesus of the Christians. And the language used, before that phrase was used, was, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Now, that was wrong for a Muslim, because the order should have been Abraham, Ishmael, and Jacob. So, he copped on. Now, do you see what's going on there? The Lord is preaching from a modern pulpit called the cybersphere, and he's getting to millions and millions of people through this modern language. We need to get on board, and in our way, quietly, if we're with somebody in conversation, never get into an argument, know how to handle these precious tools. Point them to what does it for you. It's far more powerful than getting into a dysfunctional argument. Leave them alone before what you know will have its effect on any open soul. So with that, I leave you, but I invite you to do the same. Implement a new computer. Lines written on the eve of the departure for Rome after ordination, for the purpose of doing more research with this new computer in view of the doctorate. A little box of tricks, a mouth to be. Tomorrow, heard again. A head to hold the thought of yesterday. A memory to withstand all time, and to withhold the waves of thought from long oblivion's night. And all the might of knowing to restore upon the fragile page that age from sight at times from time keeps well. This here thou told. For but a day now holds sweet Babylon, and solitude of thinking very high, and deeply on, and gently on, upon the Master's voice. And each shed sigh gleamed on the silent page. Thy head shall call, and small though it may be, well recall.